Okay, hello to everybody joining this live stream. Our topic today is a fairly detailed Wolfram language design issue. And this is what it's about, context aliases. So let's take a look. Hopefully there are some examples here.
Yes,
So can somebody introduce what the basic idea is here?
right. Okay, so this is a design that I mocked up, and I've run past a number of people. I think all of whom are in this meeting. And the idea is to try to do something like you see in some other languages, like JavaScript, for example, where you can have some long decorative context, but be able to in a particular piece of code to alias that context. So it's an alternative to $context path. $context path has the problem that it can lead to name collisions quite easily. And so the idea is, rather than having a name collision, that you're still using context, but you're using easier to type context.
Okay, so another way to think about this is you could have a variable called, flipple woggle gloggle something or other, and you can say f equals that. That's not at the context level, that's at the symbol name level.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
So in a sense, what you're saying is you would like to have a name for a context, just like a symbol is a name for an expression.
Yes, that's very much it.
Okay. So,
and so given that general goal, this is my specific proposal to to achieve that goal. It affects several things, but I put all the documentation in this one, for purposes of reviewing the proposal, I put all the documentation just in this one notebook for now.
All right. So. But I mean, so basically, in a first approximation, in some different world of syntax, we could imagine something where you say CC : equals, blah, 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 backtick, blah, 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 backtick, blah, 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 blah. Is that correct?
Yeah. And of course, you may not want, that's the point, is that you want to be able to access the blah, 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 but you don't necessarily want all of its symbols coming into your $context path.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
and
there are some downstream changes that follow from that.
And one of the big things that we're thinking about is in terms of the Packwood repository, is that the Packwood repository will be difficult to use if we have to guarantee that every name exposed by every Packwood can't conflict with any other name and any other Packwood.
I mean, that's the story of the function repository, that we have to uniquify all those names.
Yeah, and of course, it gets much worse with a Packwood that might legitimately expose dozens or hundreds of functions.
Yes, well, I agree with you. I mean, I think that's okay. So let's just understand the different strategies, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, let's look at our hierarchy. System context. We're very tightly controlling those names. We are sorry that we used a few names like set, for example, many, many years ago. That probably should have been a more decorated name.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? But that's the way it is. And so let's write down our sort of hierarchy of naming. Okay. So one is system context, system names. Okay, so one feature is they are carefully controlled. They can never change. Right?
Right.
Where am I going?
There's another feature of system context names. You can never escape from them. They are always present.
That's not true. I mean, it would be a really bad idea, but you could certainly change $context path to remove system.
Yeah, you try that. The front end won't like it for a start.
Right. I'm not saying it's a good idea. I'm just saying you can't escape.
What section should I put this in?
You
Probably
can't escape in the way that
Packlet.
Yeah,
things
I mean,
work.
it's fundamental to the Packlet repository, so maybe there. It's
Actually, I was
also
gonna think of
it's
package.
also potentially related to package the
Right, okay.
package stuff that we've been doing.
Okay. All right. Then we've got, okay. Wolfram repository names. We've also got private repository names. I'm just trying to understand this for a second. Then we've got sort of context names. But even there's the same issue, right? I mean, there's, two people could in principle have there's context names, but there's also potentially user unified context names. If we're going
right, and so in the context of the Packlet repository, what we've been proposing is that we enforce a rule that basically, so you have a publishing name, as part of your user account, you have a publisher name, and
does
then
it contain characters that couldn't be in a context name?
That's, I think, a tangent, not.
Okay.
But
if it does, we'll give you a slug that doesn't.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and then of the things that you've published, of course, you will have a name for your Packlet, and you aren't going to have two Packlets of the same name. Someone else might have a Packlet with the same name you've chosen under a different publisher name. And so then what we've proposed is that we're going to enforce, and this would be, through scanning and such, enforce no symbol creation outside of, if you want to submit and be accepted to the Packlet repository, no symbol creation outside of, the context, which is your publisher name, backtick, your Packlet name.
Okay.
And so that then becomes a guaranteed unique context.
So long as you're in the public Packlet repository.
Right, exactly. However, of course, people will want descriptive publisher names and descriptive Packlet names. That's entirely understandable, and then that will lead to a lot of typing.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of what drives the kind of urgency, I think, behind an aliasing proposal.
Okay. So there's a question in the repositories. Would it make any sense with this happening here to actually provide, and maybe this is crazy, to actually provide the functions in a context like that so that you can access them not through the resource function blob? Is that crazy?
It's not clear to me that it is crazy. I mean,
well, in principle, you already can, right? Because they have to have some symbol attached to them.
I know, but they have UUID symbol names, don't they, guys?
Yes.
Yeah. And you're suggesting you'd want that to load the resource to figure out what symbol to get, right?
Probably, yeah.
I think the principal craziness here is, or potential craziness is, at what point does the definition get attached to the descriptive symbol name?
Right.
Well, can't it be an auto load?
I don't know. Someone else would have to answer that.
I mean, how would it know that is? I mean, right.
Well, how about if we have a notion of an auto load on a context, an auto loadable context, where anything in that context that you ask for is something for which you try and look up an auto load?
We certainly have no mechanism for that. I'm
No,
not
I know we
sure.
don't have a mechanism right now, but I'm just saying, as a possible thing, and then the same thing could be done here with the Packlet. You know, if you say, you know, the you know, something like this.
Well, auto loading of the Packlet is a potentially more complex story because there might
Insofar
be
as it isn't just a package, insofar as it could.
right.
could
I
trigger
mean,
whole
even if it
lot.
is just a package, there might be some dynamic set of symbols. I don't know how common that is, but yes, it might very well have dependencies other than simple
Right,
packages.
but if I might, I mean, you know, just as a Packlet hooks itself into all kinds of things like the palettes list and so on and so on and so on, one of the things a Packlet could hook itself into is an auto-loading mechanism.
John, you don't have anything about the Packlet symbol proposal in here, do you?
No.
Okay. We have a proposal that was probably for another meeting to have a new symbol called Packlet symbol that would wrap a Packlet name and a symbol name and do the auto loading. And in the case of the repository, it would install as well. Download and not install, download and load context as needed.
Yeah, I'd actually forgotten that proposal. So thanks for bringing
it. And then it
up.
would turn into the fully qualified symbol in place, sort of thing.
As an evaluation time thing.
Exactly. Right.
Okay, I'm not completely getting that, but yeah, okay, fair enough.
It would serve the same purpose as the auto loading, but it would have some limitations because it's a wrapping symbol. So holding attributes and own values and stuff would be a little different.
All right, let's go back to
but
this.
Stephen, do you want this Alan Turing machines halting queue? Do you want that to work to load code from a packet that isn't yet installed?
Well, I was imagining
for packets,
but I understand that might not make any sense. I mean, I was imagining that were I to have that in a piece of code, then just like the fact that, you know, just like the really nice thing, I mean, you know, okay, so listen, you know, I use the function repository stuff every day. It's really useful to be able to have this thing where I'm not grunging around trying to figure out where is it and do I have it installed on a new machine and I send the code to somebody else and they don't have it installed and all the usual nonsense, right? The mechanism we have right now is really nice. And, you know, possibly this is a generalization of that mechanism that would work for any Packlet. But I'm wondering.
I mean, Packlet symbol is essentially the same idea as the, you know, function repository function thing for Packlets. It's kind of the same idea. It would load the Packlet.
No, I think it's a good idea. I mean, I think, you know, I think that the case where it works well is when, you know, when it's a function name, basically, and where, you know, when I say resource function of why do I have that stupid extra thing in the autocomplete? John,
it's WhackaMole. We will.
Okay, there's another mole.
I'll send a message off.
Yeah, another mole. Put it back in the ground, or whatever.
Whack it, I believe is the expression.
But it's moles in the ground, right? It's not moles of Avogadro's number or anything like that.
Yeah,
it's in the arcade game.
Be interested to know how to whack Avogadro's mole.
Well, it takes a really long time because there are 6.022 times 10 to the 23rd of them.
Okay. Okay, so let's say something like this. Why was I doing this? I mean, to me, this is a nice, clean thing. I mean, I would literally love us to have some kind of, you know, more control equals-y way to enter that. But that brings me to the possibility that, you know, okay, so we've got this, fine. And now here, if I evaluate that, I get that, which I think maybe the design of this could be cleaned up a bit. But the question really is, I think this is a little bit too heavyweight. I think we should take down the heaviness of that border, by the way. I know that's irrelevant to this meeting, but maybe somebody can take that point in. Can somebody do that?
Yeah, Stephen, I did that.
Okay. But what you're suggesting is the same kind of thing, a blob basically that is generated by a piece of code.
The idea is that it would evaluate to the symbol. So if you evaluate it, you'll get out something that has full context. It won't stay a blob after evaluation. Is the idea for this?
Okay,
so it's a little different.
Fine, but you see, but this somehow relates to your aliasing thing, because what you're saying is,
well, no, I disagree with that statement. Right, the aliasing is right. I don't want to have to write Packlet symbol blah 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 if I'm writing a bunch of If I'm writing my own package which uses a Packlet, right? I don't want to do that. I want to load the Packlet once and then have an easy way to access all of the symbols in it.
I get it. I get it.
I think there are two approaches to accomplish something similar. And we've talked about this before, Todd and some other people, that Packlet symbol is, we think of as like the trial period for a Packlet.
Yeah, if you're writing production code,
right.
Code that needs to be fast and not have any weird state around it, you're not going to use Packlet symbol.
Exactly. Packlet symbol is the interactive notebook case. It's not.
Yes, exactly. It's the case similar to the function repository case. It's the case where there's a great big Packlet out there, and I just want one little function that I'm going to use from it.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
In a prototyping, development, playing around sort of way, often.
Right, and you don't want to have to type Packlet install blah and then needs blah. Right, it encapsulates all of that.
Right, but so the point that I'm making about the aliasing is this. Okay, what you're saying is this would evaluate to this, right?
Right.
Okay, so what I'm saying is if there is also an alias here, then this could, I mean, I don't know whether it makes sense, but
it's not quite evaluation. There's something that happens at scan time.
I understand that causes this to expand to this. But I'm saying that in terms of print form, so one question is, assume you've done the aliasing and then you enter this long name. Does it print with the alias or not?
No.
No,
the alias is purely a scanning tokenizing thing. It's not for output the way I've written it up.
Okay. All right. Okay, fine. Okay. So
you have more than one alias to the same thing?
Of course.
Yes.
Right. So that is also
right. That sort of answers the question of whether it can use the alias for output.
Exactly.
Fine. Okay. Right. Okay. Dead story. Okay. So then right. Okay. So here you're guaranteeing that these Packletified names are unique. Aliases, and for example, a Packlet might use aliases, which might step on other aliases defined by another Packlet.
Well, the point is that the Packlet doesn't declare the alias. You declare the alias.
Okay, so the Packlet never, I mean, I know that, this usually...
So this is part of the proposal, is that you can use the alias internal to your package, and it will not, the alias you chose will not escape your package. So you can conveniently author your code however you want. And as long as it's bundled up in a begin, end, begin package, end package, then it's contained.
I see. But how does it do that? I mean, isn't it an evaluation time thing to set up the alias?
Well, so I mean, we haven't actually looked at the proposal yet.
Okay,
at some point, we have to look at the actual proposal.
Okay, all right, fine.
And if you could increase the magnification a bit.
Okay. So, the idea of the proposal was kind of, starting with something like $context path. And I used that as an inspiration for how to construct this. So $context aliases, it's an association, and it's basically just rules of alias context.
Yeah.
You can modify $context aliases directly but it can also be modified by things like needs, begin package, end package,
Okay,
begin
so
end.
I forget what needs. Okay, so needs normally has a context and a file. So what you're proposing, I would suspect, is something of the
It's
form.
actually in the excluded marked paragraph. There is what I'm
Oh,
proposing.
you know what? We were about to propose the same thing. Well, fancy that. Yeah, I was going to propose that.
Yeah. And one of the important things to understand about this is that you can use this syntax to specify an alias or not. You might specify none, in which case there wouldn't be an alias. But either way, this syntax changes the behavior of needs so that needs no longer adds the context of $context path.
I get it.
Right, but I mean, wouldn't it be more accurate to say that needs does not allow context path to be modified, right? Because isn't it actually begin package and end package that add it to the context path?
Yeah, it is. It's end
Okay.
package that adds it to the context path.
Okay.
Now,
Yeah, I defer to Ty
okay,
on that. Yeah.
Okay. So in the modernized concept of how packages will work, which hopefully Connor will get to work on soon, how would this work?
I mean, the approach taken with the the modern package format is pretty different because it defines a whole different sort of phased approach to loading packages. So there's an analogous concept of aliasing symbols or contexts, but it's very different than what's happening here, where things are being loaded dynamically.
Explain more. So, but the question is whether this design will just get blown up by that.
Well, I think obviously we'd really want them to function quite similarly, so that there isn't, as you said, a blow up because they do fairly different things. But that's still an open question how to integrate this design into the design of the new package format.
But the new package format is a scan time story mostly. Is that correct? Rather than an evaluation time story.
Correct.
Rather than a begin package, which happens at evaluation time, there is a mechanism which I remember talking about like 2 years ago, but I can't remember. There's a syntax for it, right? There was some.
There's a small. I mean, the details of syntax are not nailed down, but the idea is there's a special syntax for making those meta level, directives for how the package should be parsed.
Yes.
So you have things like package import, package export, package symbol. Or there's a couple others, but that's the
right.
general.
But those are indicated in some special way in the source code that is picked up by the scanner. Is that correct?
Correct. I think what we looked at was some kind of like
yeah.
prefixed @ sign a long time ago, but I don't think we ever made an actual choice.
Right. So it's pseudo Wolfram language syntax with that.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me just understand that for a second. So that would set up the whole package scope thing. And the basic bottom line for a package is a package defines a context and puts its symbols in in the context. And then it either does or doesn't add that context to the context path. Is that correct? That's package export would add that context to the context path. Is that true or is that not true? I mean, that's what end package does right now, is add the context to the context path. Am I right?
End package is what adds the context to the context path. I mean, package export, the existing package export is something slightly different. It says place this symbol in the actual context of the package rather than in an internal hidden away context. So it's a way of sort of distinguishing between your internal variables.
Is there an existing package export? No.
I think there is. Isn't that what it's called? There's
no. There's a thing. There's begin and begin package.
I mean,
what is all this crud here? Look at this. Look at that crud. There is no package export. I'm sure there isn't. I'm sure there are very few. There's begin package, end package. which are unfortunately going to be kind of, they're going to have the family name but not be part of the package function family, I suspect.
But isn't package export part of the current new package format? Isn't that a symbol that you can put into a package file?
What does the new package
others
format?
have
The
used
new
it.
package format is not yet implemented anywhere, right?
Well, there is
Yeah, it
something. I mean, there is something called a new package format, which is implemented, but is not documented and incomplete.
Okay,
But
fine.
it's what it's
But that's the thing that Connor is talking about finishing, right?
Well, actually, the thing,
No,
and I'm
that's the
yeah.
new package
Yes.
format. We got to get the terminology right. That's the new package format. The new package format is in use by a number of packages for a while now in layout, and that has a set of, that does the scan time pass over the
Okay,
file
fine.
and all
So
that.
it's a preliminary version of what will be the new package format.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So the point here is, instead of adding to context, the end package format function, which right now at evaluation time adds to $context path, this would prevent that from happening by essentially blocking $context path or something. This needs context arrow val would essentially block $context path. Perhaps.
Correct. And
Right.
conceivably, we could also come up with a signature for end package, which would block it, regardless of how you called needs.
Yeah.
And we might even choose to enforce that usage of end package in the Packlet repository. We haven't really discussed that. I don't know if that's a good
All
idea
right,
or not.
okay,
But
fine.
yeah.
But then, all right. So, I mean, this looks pretty reasonable to me. People do tend to have, not that I'm an expert on these other languages that have import as, but people do seem to have, I mean, it must be very, very, very confusing to their users, but anyway, whatever. A sort of standardized, you always import this package as foo or something.
Yeah,
Python does that all over the place.
I can't say how many examples I've seen of people doing the kind of NumPy hello world type examples that begin import NumPy as NP.
Right, I understand, but the question is, NP is arbitrary except it's not.
Right, it is arbitrary, but a lot of people happen to use it. Yeah.
No, but you see, but that's the point. That's how it gets. That's how things go wrong, right? It's because it's like human language where it's like it's arbitrary, but everybody does it this way. Nobody ever thought about it, and it just winds up being that.
But it's explicit, right? It won't work unless at the start of your code block you have import NumPy as.
Oh, I understand that. Although that becomes, it's like, hash includes standio.h. It's like it becomes a or c.sysin dd star from a different period.
And by the way, I think that in terms of how this works in notebooks, I mean, we already have context isolation in notebooks, and context isolation basically gives the front end permission to fiddle with $context path on a per notebook or even a per cell group or per cell basis. And I think that context aliases would be added to that same isolation mechanism.
Say that again, make me understand. So this is okay. The thing that I'm concerned about here is this idea that the such and such package, it's always called foo. It's always alias to foo.
Mm-hmm.
Now, so it suggests to me that there should be a proper recommended alias mechanism.
Yeah, I don't see how
I'm
you get
skeptical
from there
of
to
that.
here.
Well, because rather than it being an unknown incantation, right, that is just sort of an incomprehensible incantation, because then people are going to have examples that use Oh, I don't know. I mean, what happens in the
Well,
example?
for the Packlet repository, for the my plan for the examples is we'll have a top level shingle page like we have in all the repositories, where all the click to copies give this Packlet symbol wrapper around it, and they'll just work. And then within the actual documentation of the guide pages and the symbols or not, there won't be any of that. It'll assume that you've done Packlet install, and that and that it
Okay, so listen.
works
The
normally.
mechanism we need there is when you copy a cell out of that piece of documentation, it should somehow, I don't know, it should somehow become multicellular and have an initialization piece to it. Because otherwise we're going to have the situation that people say, oh, I've got all this documentation. I'm looking somewhere in the middle of, I landed there from a web search. I'm in the middle of this page. I copy this thing. I copy it and, oh, it doesn't work. So I'm saying, so the question would be, John, if you copy a cell, perhaps from the cloud, perhaps from a notebook, whatever, that on paste, somehow there could be some cell options that are set that causes it to pull in some initialization or at least
yeah,
message.
but you had, I mean, that's certainly possible now, but you have to know to set the cell options.
Well, I know that, but we could do that for documentation. We could do that whenever, for example, in any Packlet documentation, we could do that. Every single cell in Packlet documentation would set that. And if we had the right logic, if it was pasted into something where it knows that that's already been loaded, then it doesn't say anything.
Well, and so this is a problem we've already kind of started to have in certain ways. Well, I mean, anything. So we've used example data to kind of try to work around some of these cases, but sometimes example data isn't enough. Like, I mean, when I've tried to document git link, it's like, I have to, in every single example, start with git open.
Yeah, right. I understand. I think it would be really good to have a mechanism to have initialization associated with a copyable cell. I mean, I think it would be nice. We could imagine a thing where in the cell bracket, there's some indication that this is a cell that has some initialization needed to run it.
So nothing needs to be added to the front end to do this. What needs to be added to is the documentation system to make it straightforward to construct examples that have.
Oh, yeah, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think but then, so let me understand the UX of this. So I have this example here, and it requires a bunch of preparation to make it work, right? But I just take this naked cell, I copy it, I paste it somewhere. What happens?
So for what I'm talking about, I mean, if you're copying and pasting between notebook front ends, there's no problem. If you're copying and pasting,
there's no problem. What is it?
Sorry. Let me correct that a bit, because I mean, even in the examples as we have them now, the isolation isn't, the initialization and isolation isn't necessarily on a per cell basis. It might be a per cell group basis, because a particular example might have a series of inputs.
All right, look, my main point is I want to associate just initialization code, but I don't want to rerun the initialization code if I don't need to rerun the initialization code.
Sure.
So do you think that mechanism exists in the front end right now to set up, to orchestrate all of that?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I mean, a combination of, front end and kernel features. I mean, we have the once feature, if all else fails, right?
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point.
There are similar things in the front end. If they serve the exact purpose, great. But if not, we can fall back to once.
Okay, listen, you guys should spec this for DocuTools or whatever, or for the modern version of that. This is a really good thing to have. This has been, I had not realized we were so close. I would personally like to see, for a cell, I mean, what about in the original?
But I dodged your question a bit. If you copy and paste to not a notebook front end, then yeah, we would need to make a front end change there. It wouldn't be a terrible front end change.
I think we
but
should
would
make
need
it.
to
We
one.
should have a choice then when you paste it. When you copy
Oh,
it.
no. You don't get a choice when you paste.
No, but you get a choice when you copy.
Yeah.
And it should ask.
As you know, I do not like dialog boxes coming up when you copy. It's a terrible thing.
Well, okay. Well, in that case, what would it copy by default? It would probably copy the end result, not the preparation.
Well, so we already have a way of figuring out what to copy. We have an option that basically says, do you want to preserve evaluation semantics precisely? Do you want to copy, rather than the evaluation semantics, do you want to copy something that approximates the visual appearance?
Where is that? That's the copy as mechanism.
That's actually part of. It uses the copy as mechanism, but what I'm referring to is this option called text clipboard type.
Which nobody knows about.
Well, that's not true. It's documented.
Okay, great. Okay, but what I might suggest is that there's some kind of flag in the cell bracket that indicates this cell is one that has associated initialization.
Sorry, I was looking up text clipboard type. I didn't catch something.
I'm saying that if it has associated initialization, so indicate in the cell bracket. And possibly also within the original notebook, if you were to just run this.
I mean, you want to talk about obscure. My thing was at least documented. The cell bracket hieroglyphs. I don't think we used to document them, but I don't think they live anywhere in the documentation anymore.
No, obviously they have to have a mouse over. They didn't have that option in ancient Egypt.
Yeah.
But we can annotate it. But then, just so I understand, then if I were to run that in the source notebook, if I would just scroll down to that place in the notebook, run this cell without running the visible initialization, it would then run the initialization, correct?
Modulo some sticky stuff around what I was mentioning in terms of, do you want to isolate groups instead of individual cells, and then how that interacts with one another?
Yeah, I mean, the isolation thing is difficult. This is not solving isolation. This is only solving initialization.
Well, yes, but the I mean, what if your goal is to have an initialization for a group of 3 cells, and then you evaluate them out of sequence? You evaluate the third cell by itself. Should it initialize there? That's the sort of question I'm asking.
Yeah, I would think so.
And that, yeah, that might require a little bit of front end work. That might not be something that we can do right now. Okay, but it's possible in principle.
All right, so let's go back to the original. Okay, so you guys are not particularly supporting my recommended alias concept.
No.
Is anybody supporting that, or is it dead on arrival?
I think in the end, there will be very few packages that, would be popular enough. I mean.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough.
I mean, you look at, repositories that have, hundreds of thousands of packages, and, there may be, in such a, in a repository like that, there might be 5 or 10 that are popular.
I know. That's the story of our efforts to say, let's use all these packages from language X, and it's like, well, none of them are actually very useful.
Yeah.
And it's just a 1 kilobyte association. You could publish libraries of aliases that people could use.
That could be a packlet.
Sure. Yeah, that could be a packlet. Okay. All right. So let's walk through this again. So you're saying that actually we have a few comments on the live stream here. Uncle Bugsy is agreeing with you, John, that these dialogues on copy and paste are a bad idea. I retract. I mean, of course, we do have a few, from external programs pasting into our notebooks. We do have to have some things, and those I think work quite nice.
Yeah, but fortunately, it's actually quite rare and pretty good about knowing if a decision, is if a user decision is really warranted here.
Yeah, no, I know, and they're useful. I mean, I go both ways on those dialogues, so to speak.
Yeah.
Okay. Sander is asking, who came up with the word Packlet? Is it an English word? The answer is, long ago, before there were app stores, we had this idea of doing what is now essentially the function repository. This is what, more than 10 years ago now. Well over 10 years ago.
Oh, much more. Yeah, a long time ago.
15 years ago, maybe. Yeah, right. I think it was finally derailed by resources used for Wolfram Alpha, so I think it must have been on the order of 15 years ago. In any case, we had the idea, which actually we have not implemented one part of now, which maybe we should look at again now. The idea was that we have a mechanism for expanding our system. You start typing a name and the autocomplete would show you other related available functions that you could get from this, what we would now call repository. And I guess we don't really do that, do we? Do we deal with unloaded function repository functions in the autocompletes?
No. Well, sorry. I'm going to say I don't know. Actually, you're talking about repository functions. I'm not.
No,
sure.
but what I'm saying is, let's imagine that I start typing. I start typing just at top level bird, right? We're not giving bird say here.
Yeah, for actual symbols, as opposed to completion of strings instead of resource function. But for actual symbols, it's only what is actually declared in the system. If it's not declared in the system, we don't complete it.
Right. I mean, the original idea with what became called function packlets was that in this situation, you would also see, and it's not totally obvious we shouldn't do this, and particularly when we have that non-contiguous, non-prefix autocomplete. What do you call that?
Fuzzy completion.
Okay, whatever. I mean, yeah, but where this could be BI and it would still autocomplete to this. Once we have that, it might actually be not completely crazy to have names of function repository things available through this.
By the way, BI would obviously complete to that. Better example would be like BSD completing the Birnbaum-Saunders distribution.
Right. Oh yeah, I didn't see the other I. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Anyway, that's the thing. We should revisit that as soon as we have fuzzy completions. So I think Manu, is that? Yes. Can you make a note of that, please?
Yeah, that goes to Parth.
Sure, I can take out of that.
Okay. Okay. So anyway, the question was about the origin. So what happened was, we originally, there was going to be function packages, but then we wanted a name for a minimal function package that was just a one function thing, and it became
Stephen, I don't mean to contradict you, but I don't think that's the correct history of the word packlet, because the word packlet goes back long before the function packlet idea came around. That was a type of packlet that. But I'm pretty sure, Stephen, that you, and maybe Tom remembers differently, but I'm pretty sure that you actually coined the word packlet in a meeting way back at the dawn of this, because I know that Tom and I were working on
other names. There was a name Mathlet as well, was a name we threw around.
I can't remember what we called it.
Okay, well, the answer is
Packlet,
September
but I think
2004. Okay, I just looked in my archive. September 2004, first use of the name Packlet, and there's a discussion of Packlets versus function homepages. So there's some. Let's see. Hold on one second here.
The discussion might still be relevant.
It might still be relevant. Yes.
Right, but I guess I always understood it as just a small package, just like an applet.
Yes.
Was
Yeah.
like
Right.
a small
That
application.
it came kind of out. That's exactly.
Okay,
what
so
it
the
was,
answer
like
is
the
September
package.
2004. So we can define that, and I'm not seeing evidence here.
And it is definitely not an English word.
Yeah,
I mean, except in our usage.
Scrabble. Right. Yeah, I can't validate. By September 3rd, 2004, I was sending mail saying Packlets versus function homepages. And looks like biggest activity, wow, for the name Packlet was actually between 2009 and 2011, at least for me.
That was probably that was, I'm guessing, the function Packlet repository stage where we were working on that and discussing that.
I have to bring this up just for fun. This is from Peter Overman, and this, I assume, I don't know what this is actually going to be, so this might be totally scary, but this seems to be, there's a dialogue on paste. Oh, this was a sample Packlet from Peter Overman, dated January 10th, 2005. 15 years. Okay, so that's the answer. Yes, no, it's a made-up word, and it wasn't a typo, and yes, it was a minimized. Yeah, it was intended to be a minimal package, but that wasn't contradicting what I said, was it, Todd?
No, it's just that the idea, it was really data Packlets. It was one of the very first motivations for the Packlet system. And
that's right, but that was later. That was significantly later. That was after the Packlet concept had been established in the function case, and we had gotten pretty close. We had mock-ups of the whole function mechanism. I think data Packlets didn't happen until 2007. 2 years later.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, because they were in the run-up to Wolfram Alpha. They were the first feature of Wolfram Alpha that was released before anybody knew about Wolfram Alpha, so to speak. Right, somebody's noting that it's nice that we remember these things. Yeah, well,
2004, that's you sent some mail about them in 2004.
Yes, that's what I just found.
Spelling dictionaries.
What's that?
Spelling dictionaries.
Are you serious? That's what spelling dictionary? That the word should be.
That's the email. The subject was spelling dictionaries. Should I forward it to you?
Sure, but I mean, I would have it if I sent it. You mean it was about Packlets in the spelling dictionary?
This is the earliest reference to Packlets I can find in my system, which is probably inferior to yours, but for what it's worth. I'm sorry.
Well, please send it if you wish. Yeah.
Yeah.
Each folder under the. I see. This was okay. Oh yeah. You know what? We had an internal mail alias for Packlets starting by 2005. There was an internal mail alias discussing these.
Yeah, I just looked at the first commits into the Packlet manager were in 15 years ago, 7 months. So that would have been 2004.
Sandra's apologizing for derailing our meeting with discussing. But it is interesting for us.
I think you get credit for the name, Stephen. I do think you coined that word.
Yeah, I'm sure I did.
I agree with that.
Right. I'm just looking at this piece of mail from you, Tom, that I think is still relevant. I'm going to bring it up from 2005.
Well, GUI kit.
That's not relevant, presumably.
I don't know that I've even ever heard of this Kovas person.
What do you mean?
Oh, Vas, come on.
Really?
Actually, Itai, I think it's a good idea that you haven't actually.
No.
Right now,
Not at all.
record.
Not at all. You
think
two might not get on perfectly, but you both have interesting
Encourage
ideas.
your diplomatic side, Itai. So.
Okay.
Okay. In any case, all right. Let's come back to this. All right. There was another comment here from Ethan. First time you want to run a symbol from the Packlet repository, it would be nice to interactively be prompted for one-click installation.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I'm not sure if that's part of our running proposal, but I agree that there's a certain amount of sense there.
Right. I'd like to talk about one thing with respect to that. When I see actually 2 points here, in the function repository, when there is an update to a function repository function, I get this stupid message where I have to then copy out something from the message. I mean, in other words, let's say I try and use something for which there is an update. What I would really like is that there's a piece of UX that interactively prompts me to update the thing. I mean, I would be perfectly happy if it threw that thing into some, I mean, right now it's coming out in Notebook as essentially a warning message, right?
Right.
Possibly it should throw it to a notifier of some kind, maybe through the channel framework or something, that is a global notification of their, maybe that's a stupid idea. But you get what I'm saying. But right now it comes out as a piece of text, which is really annoying. And you have to, the only thing I know to do is to copy from the warning message into a new cell and run the Packlet update.
Right. We used to have a button, but the UX was bad because people thought it was updating like in time, right? In that evaluation, which doesn't make any sense, right? Because you would only hit
I see the evaluation already. Let's walk through this for 1 second.
Right.
Okay. Do other people here understand the issue?
So the problem is you have like a typeset resource function, which is referring to a specific UUID that is locked on a version. Is that the
No?
The UUID is not locked on a version, no.
But let me show an example. I mean, I wonder whether, I don't know if birdsay has been updated, but let's just see. No. Give me something that's been updated recently.
Well, you could do it. The data repository COVID things get updated every day about.
Okay. All right. Okay.
That'd be resource object.
Okay. What is?
You could also ask for the old version of birdsay.
No, that won't do it for me. I need a thing.
Should just be able to resource object open, then start typing epidemic, and it should autocomplete to the COVID thing that gets updated all the time.
Resource data.
Resource object I would do. Otherwise, we'll sit here for 3 minutes watching you download. Epidemic.
Okay.
Oh, well, that's SARS. It should have the one for COVID in the autocomplete.
One would have thought.
One would have thought.
It's not called something else like pandemic or something, is it?
No, that's not useful.
No, it's called epidemic. Epidemic data,
That's just so depressing. Could you get that fixed, please? That the autocomplete list, there's been a pandemic going on for close to a year, and we don't have that. I mean, we have all the data being updated every single.
Sorry, I thought there was a process. This was supposed to be updated on a monthly basis.
No, even more than that. I'll figure out why that one's not in there. I just put it in.
I must not have already had this in this. Okay, so let me explain what would have happened.
So you basically you have a locally cached version that's older than what's on the server.
That's correct.
Exactly.
And then what happens is, when I ask for the resource object here, it will come up with a message, right? That says, this is not the most recent version, blah, 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 blah. But then it will go ahead and return that version.
It'll complete the evaluation with the cached version.
Well, the correct UX here would be to make this box have something which is like that I'm not loaded in the notebook, load me now thing.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense when you're
except
returning the resource object. But if it's resource data or if it's wrapped in another evaluation, right, that's not going to work.
That's not useful.
Right. And it also doesn't update %, which could lead to other types of confusion.
We do have, if you have an out-of-date resource object, there is an update button under the fold in the blob.
For the function, for resource function.
Okay, listen, if that's the case, right, it shouldn't be below the fold. If it requires an update, it should not be below the fold.
Requires is a strong word.
Well, no. If there is an update, it should not be below the fold.
Yeah, sure, we can do that.
Okay, that's an easy fix, but that's not solving the problem of it being inside code.
Could we make the button bubble up to the input cell and reevaluate the input cell after updating the data?
Well, so the issue is at runtime, so, a given piece of code might have 3 out-of-date packlets in it, 3 out-of-date resources in it, okay? Each one generates a message. Says, you can update this, you can update this. Let's say they have buttons. Those buttons, if they are pressed, will not affect the current evaluation. They will only affect subsequent evaluations.
I mean, I don't like the idea of preempting at all.
What do you mean by preempting?
Well, I don't want to stop the evaluation and wait for the user to make a decision.
No, absolutely not.
Right.
So maybe it's a messaging problem. I mean, look, there's 2 possibilities that I can see. One, there might be a way of messaging it in that message. 2, it might be worthwhile to have some global, there are updates ready for you now.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, we have a way to update everything you have cached with resource update open close, I think, or resource update all.
Well, so maybe that should be in the toolbar.
Right. And then there's also the resource version option as of 12.1, where you can do resource version goes to
I'm
latest or current.
Okay, look, here's the UX that I'm suggesting, okay? The message comes out here, says there's a new version, and then it has a button that takes you somehow to a control panel for updating these functions.
Sure. Yeah.
What's that?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Because then there's no idea, then that's a separate control panel. Nobody thinks it's going to update the particular thing you already have.
Right. The control panel is making the control panel is a lot of GUI and design work, but yes.
Well,
I'm
not sure how much of a control panel it really needs to be. I mean, it could be as simple, but the question,
it reminds me a bit of something like the messages window, or something like when you're saving notebooks to the cloud, and that spins off into a background process with that window that shows you the progress of its uploading.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's the right way to do it. And that could be hung off what could happen is if it finds that there is a package that needs to be updated, there could be a little red thing that comes up in the toolbar when we have a standardized toolbar that says, updates are waiting for you, just like it does in web browsers and other things.
Yeah, sort of a resource administration toolbar palette sort of thing. It's definitely a good idea. It's been on the radar for a while, and we haven't really.
All right, but I think.
And that could be generalized beyond resource objects as well.
To what? Well, to packlets in particular.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, okay, but look, I think it's the right way to do it, and I think we should try and get a minimal design for this, and this will solve the problem of this stupid, this solves the UX confusion of this message. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Mm-hmm.
Are we back to aliases yet?
I I think we are. Yes. Hold on 1 second. Yes. Was there something else I was going to say about the no. Okay, right. Great. I mean, to me, this, I think, is there any more to say about it? I mean,
Well,
I think this
I mean,
mechanism
feel
seems
free to
make
walk through
sense.
the examples. I tried to cover, I think, most of the interesting things in examples with that. These are not live examples; these are mocked outputs, but to give you an idea of what to expect.
I see. So that is the equivalent to what I was saying might be : equals or something. Is this thing here?
Yes.
Yep.
That's a little bit of a weird left-hand side. We don't have a lot of dollar blah.
I'm not
blah.
opposed to something like the : equal in principle. I just didn't think of it, but maybe.
I don't know. I don't think it needs to necessarily be that short. But I'm wondering whether this, like when you tell people out of 3, look at every output prompt. It says out of 3 equals, right? When you tell people that means that out of 3 is equal to that, they get very sort of cognitively confused often. In other words, they didn't think of it as it actually meant what it said.
Yeah.
And, that makes me feel that this would be better off with a function that's called set alias or something that does this, even though you might be able to do this raw thing if you wanted to. Well, see, but this is kind of a fake, isn't it? Because this would have to be faked, because it's not the case that a pure association there would do this.
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is.
There's nothing fake about it. The only thing that's fake about it is what you see in the scope, where it really, it has behaviors if you try to violate its associationness. But
Wait a minute. Am I just monumentally confused?
You're monumentally confused.
Okay, good. Okay, so if I say this, A goes to 1. Okay, now I say FFB equals 4.
There you go.
It's just like SMP. They used to do that too. I was so allergic to that for 25 years.
That's in my view, that's one of the brilliant and useful things about associations. We use that in the front end all the time.
I should use that a lot more. That was the great unification of SMP. The problem was it went too far and it tried to make vectors, lists be this, but with the indices just being 1, 2, 3, 4.
And by the way, equal dot also does what you think it should. FFB equal dot removes that.
Well, that's nice. But you see the thing. Okay, so let me show you let me show you the thing that made me allergic to this for 25 years or more. SMP would take that object there, okay, and it would make that equivalent to the list ABC.
It's like JavaScript.
Oh gosh, really? They do that?
Yeah.
Oh, how fascinating. Well, there are no new ideas under the sun. I guess. Anyway, that was a disaster. I guess it hasn't worked out well. I don't know what it's done for JavaScript. But in other words, what would happen is, as soon as you filled in the whole thing, it would suddenly turn into that, dense list. So if you had 1 and 3, it would just be an association-like thing. They were called, what were they called? Functions were called projections, but what the heck were those things called? I only remember somebody having the joke of calling them optical benches because functions were called projections and arguments were called filters. Maybe we never named those things. Anyway, doesn't matter. let's see. But yeah, the disaster was that it was just so bizarre to know. That must, you know what? I've heard people complain about that in JavaScript too, that it's bizarre to know when it turns into a list and when it's an association.
Well, I think in effect it doesn't turn into anything else. That's what it is.
I see.
But there's
the
some
issue,
abstract thing under. That's the abstract model. There's some probably deeper thing. Jitted
but I
layer.
mean, the point is that, for example, there are plenty of things that you might do on a list that you couldn't expect to do on an association.
Yeah, like there's really weird subtleties to iterating over lists in JavaScript that I think come down to this. Like there's two different operators you use. I forget what they are, but it always bit me when I wrote JavaScript.
Yeah, I think these are subtleties that can be.
Boy, if there was more of a discipline of language design, people would know these things. Somebody would have actually known that this was something that was tried in SMP and what went wrong, as opposed to it being rediscovered. Okay, in any case.
There's XKD about this, Lisp cycles.
Right.
These are your father's parentheses.
Yeah, right. Well, did you know? Okay, here's a piece of language trivia for you. Did you know, and I just learned this, as I was doing this research about combinators, that in John McCarthy's original paper about Lisp, he had two formats that he proposed for Lisp: the S expression format with parentheses and the M expression format. Have you seen this? Have you seen the M expression format?
I've heard of it, but I don't remember.
It's basically Wolfram language expressions, right?
It is, yes, it is.
I remember that.
It is. It's got square brackets.
Square brackets and
everything. I'm just trying to see if I can let's see whether I can find this just for a second, because it's really amusing. I literally just found this. Let me see if I can just pull it up for 1 second. And then we will get back to the you know what, I signed up to do a live stream about Q&A about history of science and technology, which actually is in about an hour and a bit. So maybe I'm segueing into that, but let me just find this just because it really was quite amusing. Come on, where is it? Calculus. Here we go. Here we go. This is John McCarthy's paper, and look at that. Look at those square brackets. The difference and the plan, and I remember actually talking to John McCarthy about this, that he was like, well, we were going to do the S expressions first, and then we're going to do the M expressions, but that was in 1959, and we never got around to the M expressions. But the difference is that their argument delimiter was semicolon, not comma. But that's
well, it's they got the comma. They just added the bit more. They just
right.
added that extra bit of ink there.
You put a dot over the comma.
Right. Anyway, okay. So, right. Ethan is suggesting,
backtick equal is what he's suggesting. That was mangled in the copy paste, but backtick equal, yeah.
Right. But that's ambiguous, isn't it? Maybe it isn't ambiguous. Backtick equals.
Yeah, you can't end a symbol name with backticks.
Right. You can only end a something that is a context and string. Well, that's interesting, because that would be a very literal thing. You're saying this context. Well, except what it's looking like is that context is being aliased to this. It's not the worst thing in the world, because it is effectively a context.
You can end a number.
But you can't set a number on the left-hand side of an equal sign.
Yeah, I mean, the weird thing is, it's kind of like the name and the backtick equal. They all have to sort of scan as one thing, I think.
Right, or we need to figure out some way to auto-stringify, right? Because string contexts aren't literally that thing. They're I would be very dubious of this syntax.
Well, okay, I think it's an interesting idea, and I think it makes more sense than : equals.
Right. I mean, are there also going to be symbols, set context alias, clear context alias sort of thing?
I think we should have that. I think this is what's that?
I would want that, especially like if I'm writing it in a package file, not a notebook.
Okay, it's not obvious to me that the term context alias. I mean, I do like this notion of import as. And
that's of course you're right there at the bottom. You're seeing the needs example, which we've already discussed.
By the way, I'm being told I should plug the Science and Technology Q&A at the top of the hour after this coming one at 5 o'clock Eastern time. Maybe as one of the topics we can talk about the history of Lisp and so on.
Just FYI, Stephen, since we've gone 20 minutes over and probably another 10 minutes or so, some repair people are coming and I will have to disappear. So
okay, but don't okay. You will, yeah, right. Okay. Are they repairing you or someone? Never mind.
Not me, but I think
right. No.
I don't want them to break down the door, you see.
Yeah, right. Okay. In any case,
so
the question is, are people actually going to be typing this, or is this a low-level thing like monkeying with context path, which you don't typically do?
Well, yeah, I think that's a good question. I mean, certainly, my initial thought is that the needs syntax is, probably going to be the most popular way of doing this. Or
I would think so.
Yeah.
I mean, this low-level thing, yeah, we can support it. And then maybe it's fine as you have it. So, okay. So what else do you want to show here?
Okay. So along with needs, there's begin package, which just basically follows needs.
Right.
And any changes that you make either as a result of begin package or inside of begin package are then reverted by end package.
I'm just so bothered by the fact that you have this code. I mean, one of the things that's really, really nice about our language in general is that because sort of batteries are included with everything, you can copy a piece of code and it'll basically just run. As soon as we're doing this, where the actual, I suppose you could say anytime I've defined a function f, that's not true. But yeah, maybe this is the same thing. It bothers me that you will have big lumps of code that say EP backtick whatever, and taken out of their natural habitat, they will not run.
I mean, that's true for package development all the time.
Fair enough.
It really is.
Yeah, okay.
For any non-trivial package. Maybe for a trivial package might not be true, but for any non-trivial package, it's definitely true.
Okay.
The thing about using needs for this, and I recognize that's a convenient syntax. Needs is sort of like the setting the context alias, but needs also has the side effect of trying to load a context. I might want to use context aliases for packages for contexts that are not packages, right? A private context or something, right? I might well want to make a context alias for something that I wouldn't want needs to attempt to load.
I understand, like a private alias that you're for debugging, for example.
Yeah, well, an alias to a context that doesn't map to a package and therefore can't be loaded with needs, right? Maybe a private context within my package. I just want to make an alias for that. So I would have to use. There are some uses for which you have to use whatever low-level function we provide for explicitly setting an alias. And the question
the bottommost example is a version of that. Sorry, it was the bottommost. You just scrolled it.
Which one?
But where you next one down.
By the way, and here you're saying
it says end package restores $context aliases regardless of how additions were made. So in this case, an addition was made inside the package.
Okay, I get it. what about this case here, where you're saying there's certain things that cannot be set up as aliases?
Right. So this and
No,
dollar context path does something similar. You can't just, assign dollar context path to any old expression. It's got to be a list of, a list of contexts, and that's
no, but this is a different thing. This is essentially a sock puppet context or something that you're.
So and by the way, I put the XXX there because that's kind of an open question. Should it? The other three, I think, are, I stand behind. This one, I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe it's an issue, maybe not.
Yeah, legal symbol name is fine, right? Otherwise we're going to, good. It's not very useful if it isn't a legal symbol name.
Yeah.
The question here is, should you be able to? I mean, I can see all kinds of sort of nasty security-like things. It's like a phishing thing. You think you're typing into this password dialog, but actually it's another password dialog.
Yes, exactly.
Seems like a bad idea to allow you to alias. I mean, I don't understand why you would ever want to alias something for which that context already exists. Why would you ever want to alias something that's on the context path?
Well, there might be some times when you don't realize that a context exists, like the WhackaMole problem.
Yeah. Well, yes, but I mean, it's fine to tell you, because what's going to happen? I don't understand how this could possibly work. In other words, insofar as you can call something.
Yeah, no, it creates an ambiguity, and
right,
and we have to make a decision.
So I think what we should do is just say you can't set a context alias for a context that exists. And now here's two questions. That exists on the context path, that's a pretty clear answer.
Mm-hmm.
That exists anywhere in the system is a less clear answer.
Well, now both of those questions raise the obvious, okay, what happens if you add the alias, then create the context?
Well, look, this is a big pile of gunk, right?
Yeah.
We clearly know what all of these are, but it's a big pile of gunk.
Although maybe creating the context, creating the context after you have the alias gets difficult, but not necessarily impossible. I'm not sure if it's impossible.
You because your point is, as soon as you type it in, it's just running the alias.
Yes, exactly.
Well, how would you create it without? I mean, could you do it?
Well, so there are some corner cases if you scroll farther down. Things like, what are we doing with names? What are we doing with names? What are we doing with context? I have some open questions around stuff like this.
Okay, but so I have a question here. So the question is, how can you create a symbol in a certain context without referring to that context? I mean, clearly you might be able to do it by saying to expression of some constructed string, but even that.
Now, and notice my first properties and relations shows that to expression uses aliases.
Okay.
In this
By
design.
the way, recently I was thinking to expression needs a context path option, which it doesn't have right now. In fact, I would claim several functions like cloud evaluate, to expression, they need a context path, don't they? Or am I confused?
Well, you could wrap them in a block. They use the current context path, right? So if you block the context path,
I know, but it would be nice to have the possibility to have them, to have a to expression, which is a safe to expression that doesn't use, that doesn't have. I don't know. This came up recently in some very confused situation, using to expression inside some package or something that had some weird context path. I mean, it's part of setting the environment, which, okay, for cloud evaluate and the future local evaluate or session evaluate, for example, how do you set the environment? Here's another question.
By the way, not just context path, but context as well, presumably.
What do you mean contexts?
Well, I mean, where do new symbols get created? They get created in $context. That doesn't have anything to do with $context path.
That's true.
I'd go a step farther and say the contents of the symbol table. I mean, what symbols are considered to exist already or not?
Well, yes. I mean, that's a more serious sandbox. You know what? It could have been that my problem was a to-expression. In fact, I think we've had this problem. I think this problem exists in various cloud cases, and it exists in the function repository, that to-expression is operating in the context in which it finds itself. And sometimes that's a privatized context. So it creates a symbol in some totally wacky context.
Yeah, I think our earlier versions of Manipulate had issues like this where symbols would kind of pop out with, particularly in documentation examples, would pop out with weird contexts.
Bob is sending a link to this context module by Rich.
Which is somewhat related, where you can evaluate an expression in a dedicated context.
I think this
you could also imagine where you specify it.
This is a good LCC discussion about localizing contexts and into expression and so on. But back to this. It seems to me we do not know, but somebody should determine it, whether there is a way to create a context without, create a symbol in a context without naming the context. If there isn't, the course is clear. We just say you can't make an alias where the left-hand side is an existing context, and you will never be able to, create a context with a name that is the left-hand side of an alias, because you always have to refer to that name, and then then you're going to be sent back to the alias right-hand side, right? If I'm not confused there. John, do you agree?
Sorry, I got pinged through chat, and I lost a bit of that sentence.
Okay, all right. So okay, we should wrap up in a moment here, but sorry about that. The point I was making is, do you believe it is possible to create a context without naming the context in such a way that the context name will be translated by the aliases?
So I kind of don't think so, but I'm not the one who knows kind of all of the dark corners.
Okay, well, fine. So that's an LCC question. Yeah. We should try to resolve that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like for example, the new package format.
Right. Do we like the term context alias, or do we think it's? I think it's probably okay for this level of stuff. And possibly set context alias might have a syntax if it becomes commonly enough used.
Sure, yeah.
But otherwise, it's just going to be part of the needs thing. Now, in terms of names, why wouldn't this just be operating through the alias mechanism, just like every other place where you name a symbol? I mean, so that ABC backtick would expand. Oh, I see what you're saying. You want to make a query, does the thing exist? And you want to make that query ignoring the aliasing. That is, does it raw exist? There's two levels of existence here.
Yes.
There exists as a genuine output of the scanner, and there's exists as something you can type in.
And names already has some fuzzy behavior. I mean, names takes the ignore case option, for example. So it kind of makes sense that names should have something like ignore alias, at least to me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it would be ignore context aliases or something.
That's fine.
Is there anything else like names? I mean, names
so contexts, which is immediately below it. Although context doesn't take any options. Context is so far. Well, no, I'm sorry. Context does take patterns, though.
Yeah, it would be fine to have the same. Ignore context aliases would be a fine thing, I think, there. Yeah. And otherwise, it's just going to tell you context of ABC would tell you yeah, if it was a pattern, so it could be a pattern that would match to aliases rather than to contexts themselves. Or by saying ignore context aliases, you would be requiring a match to the pure patterns.
Yes.
But the case you're not covering there is a match to context aliases, but not to,
Correct. But in that case, you can always just inspect $context aliases.
Yeah, I know, but it's a piece of code to do that. But it's fine. I don't think that's a big issue.
Information is probably similar to names.
It is. Yes, that would have to be covered as well.
Does it tell you it's an alias, or does it tell you the information about the alias?
I was just thinking of information in terms of looking at symbols. I wasn't thinking of kind of. Does information take context names?
It takes
just
context strings. Yeah. Oh no, the full symbol, the symbol, fully qualified symbol as a string.
No, but what about why doesn't it? And it probably should take a context name. Wow, funky. That should work. We should make that work. That will be useful. Just like, just like the summary of just like if I do this, that would work. You see? That's what information of that should do somehow. That makes sense?
Okay, so information does not take an option as best as I can tell.
Okay, but fine. But what I'm saying is, okay, first point, and this is for the people, and that's an Itai story if he wasn't off being repaired or whatever. That this information of a context should do something interesting.
I'm going to be meeting with Itai in about an hour. I'll relay that to him.
Okay. Okay, so because this, if I say this, it does what it does, right? By the way, I really hate this, and this is something, again, this is probably for Manu. This thing that says symbol in big letters, it's just wrong that it's so big. That should be much smaller. And okay, in any case, but my point is, if it is an alias, what it should do, a little bit like in a file system, it will show you a symbolic link, and then it shows you, well, I'm not sure it's completely like that, but the idea is, I think, if it's an alias thing, it should show you the alias, and then it should show you the expansion of the alias in information.
Okay.
And if you ask about, since we're not even making this work yet at all, information of that, okay, so a question is, if you say question mark, okay, here's a case. Question mark A star B backtick foo, okay? So the question is, does that pattern patternize both the alias and the raw context?
Oh, that's an excellent question that I did not address.
Okay. I think it should probably patternize both of them. I think it has no choice. I don't see what else it could possibly mean.
Yeah.
ToString should not change it, right?
Change what?
If you give the alias, it should just turn that into a string. It shouldn't give the underlying symbol as a string.
No, it's everything. This is being a scan time thing. Like if you look at there's an example up, where is it at?
No, but John, the question is, does the context itself, does the alias context itself expand, or does it only expand when it is, hydrated with a symbol name? Do you see what I'm saying? So these are two different cases. This case and this case here.
Wait,
actually, I'm typing nonsense here.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, okay. So in fact, this doesn't make any sense anyway, because that's not legal syntax.
And in terms of the second example is informed by my second example under properties and relations. So this is not evaluation time. This is scan time.
Right. So yes. Okay. So right, that thing, it never hits the evaluator with that.
Exactly.
Okay.
I mean, in other words, context of that thing is always going to return the aliased context.
Yes. Return the, yeah, it will resolve all aliases. Yes.
Okay.
Is there a way to discover aliases for a symbol to go the other way?
Well, I mean, dollar context aliases will.
I guess that, yeah. You could build it easily. That makes sense.
All right, I consider this design a success. I think we're good here.
Okay.
Great. All right, just a reminder for people: it's the first of our perhaps series of science and technology Q&As at the top of the next hour. So anybody who's interested is encouraged to join and to come up with questions about history of science and technology. All right, that's it for this here. Thanks a lot to everybody.
Thank you. Great meeting.